Hi, I'm Kevin,
And I'm Amanda.
and we are serving up.
All that jam. A lighthearted look at the weekend jam bands.
Where we break down the jam scene's biggest stories,
Talk new bands.
upcoming tours,
And show reviews. A little laughing, some hot takes, and an always positive message for the community.
Week of November 13th, 2023, Eddie Spaghetti.
Welcome back to the All That Jam weekly wrap-up, a lighthearted look at the weekend jam bands. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Amanda.
And we are running up toward Thanksgiving, just about 2 weeks away, and a mere 50 days or so until we lay 2023 to rest. What was your week like, Amanda?
Well, Kevin, it was a good week, kind of keeping close to home, but looking forward to getting some music here in the next couple of weeks. We've got the Last Waltz as an annual treat that comes up always around Thanksgiving, so that's something I'm looking forward to.
Very nice. Yeah, I had no Spafford to watch. So we got Jordan to sit down and talk with us instead. And we also got some time with Yak Attack's Dave Dernovsek. So look for that soon. This week, though, we have the top three stories coming up as always, but we have one of our more interesting interviews. Eddie Spaghetti from the Super Suckers. They are one of my favorite bands. And I'll tell you a funny story later when we get to that part. But we covered a lot of ground with them from going from Sub Pop, a major label, to Mid-Fi, their own thing, their new albums, a couple things that they had coming up that are probably already out. Plus, we got into why he doesn't like jam bands. But before we jump into that,
the top three stories of the week.
All right, Kevin, we've got three great stories for you this week. First up, let's wish Tom Marshall a very happy 60th birthday. And he celebrated that at one of my hometown legendary haunts, the Stone Pony in Asbury Park, New Jersey. They hosted a Nectar's Presents event billed as Solimande with Russ Lawton, who we know, and Ray, Desron Douglas, too. And this was held just this past Saturday. There's a lot of people there. We saw RJ was definitely there. Megan dances. So a lot of people that are friends of All That Jam. Now, the nature of that event was unannounced to some people, but during the special occasion, Tab actually played a set as well, which included the rare tub thumping performed by the first time by this set of musicians. Kevin, were you there when that was played in the 90s by Phish?
in Hampton in 98, yes, I was.
Me too. And I
Yes.
will forever associate that song with a really great time.
And either that night or the other night, they did the Getting Jiggy with it.
I saw that. Yeah. So, walk down memory lane. Well, that merged into Happy Birthday to You, which of course is a natural progression. And that included a guest trumpeter, Tony Peruso. So sounds like a really great night. I'm sure it was. And I love that it happened at the Stone Pony because Asbury Park continues to, I think, really evolve. And from what I can see anyway, continues to get better and better at bringing people in. So
Yeah,
great
I
stuff.
saw a couple of videos people took of Tom and Trey singing Waste, I guess, and Strange Design together.
Mm-hmm.
Just Trey on acoustic guitar, which is special. There's such, there was one photo of them just with their arms around each other, and you can just see how much they love each other. And they've known each other, since they were 8 and 9, so 50 years or something, probably.
Right. I mean, amazing. Yeah. Trey, I think before that acoustic portion of the night, basically said, we've been writing songs since fifth grade. Can you imagine? And it's one of the greatest joys of my life being Tom's friend and writing songs with him. I mean, that's so beautiful and it's so genuine, like you can just feel that love that they have and the fun that they have with each other too. So definitely very cool. Now, I haven't seen, at least to this point, any recordings or audio, but I'm sure that it's out there somewhere. So I'll be looking for that.
Yeah, on Twitter there was some floating around.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, I definitely am curious, especially the acoustic stuff. All right, so great story to start with. This next one, though, Kevin, you actually shared with me, and this is a completely different scenario here. Now, we talk about how musicians are making their living. They're doing their art, right, to be able to sustain themselves all the time. You mentioned Dave from Yak Attack. He's an artist who has a job, a day job, but still pursues music as a passion. Well, it's getting harder if someone is relying on Spotify because they recently unveiled a new royalty payment system that's really going to be, I think, devastating in additional ways to indie musicians. So let me break this down a little bit. Before I do, Kevin, though, I'm just curious, do you really have any faith in a platform like Spotify to help most artists anyway?
No, because
Right.
if you can game the system, then it isn't an even playing field to start with. And if you think about it, if you played somebody's song probably day in and day out, over and over and over on repeat, they probably still wouldn't, even make a penny. 99% of any money made goes to the CEO.
Right. Exactly. So, what I'm about to share then, it is shocking, I think, just for the fact that it sets such a firm line. But on the other hand, it probably isn't too surprising to a lot of you either. Now, when you're a musician on Spotify, there's kind of a benchmark you want to try to reach, which is 1,000 plays for a song. If you don't hit 1,000 plays, I don't think Spotify even shows how many actual streams you have. So that's kind of like a mark that a lot of artists would want to reach, kind of a badge of honor, so to speak, I guess. But only about a third of songs on Spotify ever get to that 1,000 play mark. So that's something to think about. And I guess that makes sense, but really 30 something percent is a really small portion of everything else that's out there. And that's been true since Spotify first launched. So we know that a lot of artists are already not making money, but what Spotify has announced is a change to its royalty payment policy that will essentially mean that those 2/3 of all the music on the platform that do not get 1,000 plays will be ineligible for making anything, even if it was literally pennies. Now there's no way that they'll be able to make any money from those songs. I mean, pretty harsh, and I have to wonder, was Spotify really losing money on that?
Right.
I don't know.
So you game the system
Mm-hmm.
and you push yourself up to the 1,000. My question is, of the 33% or whatever that do get the 1,000, how many of them are attached to a record label of some kind, as opposed to just a band like we talked to that's uploading their stuff, just trying, please somebody catch, something, put me on a playlist, get me on the right playlist.
Right. Well, that's just it. And we've heard that right before, which is getting onto some of those Spotify curated playlists, and there's tons of them, which are usually genre driven. That's a way to ensure, I guess, that you'll get exponentially more plays. But I saw there's some quotes and some feedback to this new policy saying there's such a wide range of the numbers of streams that songs can get per artist, for labels, you name it. And so it's really kind of a tough thing because you want your more popular songs or artists to lift up others, but it's almost, I guess, making it harder to maybe even motivate people to want to do that. So maybe this will actually result in some good changes where artists may not feel like they have to do as much on
Right.
Spotify to get basically nothing still, right?
All right, where do we go? Now, Bandcamp doesn't look like it's going to be what it used to be, and Bandcamp doesn't have playlists. It didn't have that function of. I think what people have been lulled into is I can make a playlist.
Mm-hmm.
Where you used to have to listen to the radio, and you heard what the radio played, or you switched the station, or you made a tape. But when you made a tape, you had to buy all the music you were putting on the tape, or you were recording it off the radio.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
It's just too easy and it's too saturated. anybody can put something up there.
Well, that's just it. And, I also was just talking to someone about this the other day too. There's a lot of very rare music on Spotify. There's a lot of world music on there, things that you'd never expect to find. And I know all of that adds up to the 2/3, right? That's not going to get a lot of play. There's really some interesting things on there that you would never find unless you were actually looking for it. And I'm always surprised. But at the same time, trying to think of, active indie musicians that are really going for it. And then you see something like this, whether or not you were getting any money from Spotify to begin with, it's just a harsh thing, I think, to see in writing,
Yeah. But
and
didn't we have a story about something with the European Spotify?
having a different system.
Yeah, a while back. I think we touched on something they were doing over there that had to do with something similar to this, where there was going to be a threshold of some kind.
Well, I'm curious now because that's a good point. There was something this summer, which this may be what you're referring to, that lawmakers in the European Union were pushing Spotify for better pay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what it was. There were some allies in Parliament to get more transparency also from Spotify. And so, I wonder to some degree by just putting out there, that bar of 1,000 plays, that's certainly more transparent in a way. It
Right.
sucks, but it's definitely very clear.
And you can
Um,
choose to put it on there, but I think a lot of musicians would say if you don't, then you're cutting off your nose kind of thing,
yeah, it's almost like, you need to try to play the game even though you know that the game is really set against you from the beginning. And that to me feels disheartening as a fan to know that about the bands that I listen to.
Like,
You
buy a
know,
t-shirt.
but that's what I would say. Merch, merch, merch. You got to do it. Profit margins are healthy on merch compared to pretty much anything else these days. So yeah, buy direct for sure. All right. Well, you know what? As always, we'll keep an eye on this. I guess maybe somewhat in a related sense, Kevin, the third story for this week is out of digitalmusicnews.com. And what they did is they highlighted 6 independent musicians and said, how do you make your living? What do you do as an independent musician to survive? And so I thought that we could maybe go through a couple of these. I thought this was very, very interesting. We had, I guess, starting with maybe a 1%er, if you want to call it that, on Spotify. Ludicious, who I don't know who that is. I've listened to a couple of his songs. Now he has 200 million total streams on Spotify, so probably not who we were just talking about. Over 300,000 monthly listeners. There's a lot of artists that would absolutely love to have even a portion of that. Now he makes around $20,000 a month from streaming alone.
Wow.
Yeah. So I like this story because it really hits on a lot of different like types of artists, right? So they said that most of his fans listen to several of his songs every month. He also tours, he also sells merch, but in this case, his career is thanks in large part to his success on Spotify. That's one of the first artists I've ever actually seen named with a specific dollar amount that says it's coming from Spotify.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's a
Yeah.
big number.
That's a huge number. Now, it doesn't really get into any of the information about maybe how he's promoting or what he does. I'd never heard of him, which means nothing because that's probably a different genre of music. But now I really would like to go check it out. Okay, so that's the first one. Carrie Rayburn, that's another artist that I was not familiar with. He's a trumpeter, and we talk to a lot of horn players, right? A lot of those auxiliary players, and a lot of times what they're telling us is they may have one band that they kind of work with most frequently, but they're guns for hire at the same time. So here, what we learned is that Carrie makes a lot of his annual income from playing special events, so performing art centers, things that are not kind of in our everyday realm, Kevin, of going to see shows. So a performing arts center, it says, will pay between $1,000 and $15,000 or more for unknown performers. and tens of thousands for known, more experienced performers because they have budget. They have a totally different kind of financed, annual income as an art center than a lot of other venues do. So, in terms of high paying gigs, private events definitely seems like way to go for a lot of people. And then we've got Dave, Oregon Fairchild. We love them, right? I mean, they're fantastic. So Dave, out of Oregon Fairchild, is a full-time musician, as we know. He, according to this article, mainly performs for families and at schools. They used to do this all the time, playing 4-hour performances, but physically that was really hard for him to do. And this article says you can make $1,000 to $2,500 a day doing educational performances in museums, libraries, and then there's kind of different rates just depending on what it is, even online educational performances. So I actually also know Brady from Good Homes has always been doing a lot of kids songs. He's actually won Grammys in the children's music category, and that's been a huge part of his kind of continued sustained full-time musician status. So.
Was it Dave that did the period music things, like the historic?
That would make sense. And so sometimes
he talked about that in our interview when we talked to him. And also, I know somebody else was talking about doing some kind of education thing.
Yeah. That's, I guess, a different avenue. And if someone has the personality for that, and that's a type of audience that they're comfortable playing for, there's schools everywhere, and they have different kinds of quotas for events that they need to fill. I thought this was interesting. It said also he would sometimes play 2 or 3 shows a day. So if you can stack them, that's something. So makes sense.
Work one day a week.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in a way you kind of have that audience built in. So if you can get on that circuit, that probably is something that you could sustain a little bit more easily. I'll just kind of go through a few of these. What I really liked about this article, like I mentioned, is it is so specific. A lot of times when I see articles around the music industry and profit, you're not getting actual numbers. You might just be getting kind of a summary or an average or something like this. Joy Ike, I think that's how you pronounce the last name, is a singer, songwriter, artist. She was a publicist up until maybe 15 years ago, full-time musician ever since. So she does a lot of performing and, sells merch. And then her second biggest income stream is licensing music through something called MusicBed. Have you heard of that?
No, I have not.
Me either. So that's about 25% of her income. So I want to definitely check that out. We've got Claire Means, a live stream street performer, which I thought was interesting.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. So, you know what? Great article. There's a lot in here that I didn't mention, a lot of other ways that people are making it happen. So just thought that'd be interesting as food for thought.
Well, I can take this to our interview, because the first part of this interview with Eddie that we get to is he got a cancer diagnosis. And as he says, I sing for a living. Eddie Vedder, another Seattle person, they're Super Suckers originally from Seattle, reached out to him at a place called City of Hope, and he gets into that. We also get into Steve Earle, them playing Farm Aid, them playing with Willie Nelson. So, maybe stuff that we wouldn't associate with a 3-piece hard rock act. So let's check that out, and we'll see you on the other side. Somehow you did it. So in Seattle, can we talk a little bit about Eddie Vedder and something that happened with you a few years back?
Sure.
Well, you got the diagnosis for cancer. I know that has to be the scariest shit ever. My stepdad got it and passed a few years ago, so I've watched it from the outside. But Eddie Vedder reached out to you and kind of pointed you in a direction.
He did. I don't know if it wasn't for Eddie Vedder, I don't know that I would, still be able to sing. He was like, when he found out I had the diagnosis, we were heading to Seattle to play a show, and he reached out and was super supportive and hooked me up with the good people at City of Hope, and just pointed me, you know, made me think about the fact that this cancer is in my throat, and you know, you sing. This is what you do. Even though I've never fancied myself a great singer, it's not like people are coming to the Super Sucker shows to hear me hit the notes. Nobody really gives a
Right.
shit about that. But it is important that I be able to continue to do it, you know. And he made me really think about that and just put a lot of that sort of, you know, that sort of thought in my head. And he was just such a great supportive guy, and I love him so much for that.
That's fantastic. I love that. Another person that you had some contact with was Steve Earle. You want to talk a little bit about how that all came about?
Yeah, I can't remember. Oh, we met Steve in '95, I think it was, when we played a Farm Aid. We played the first Farm Aid that we did in '95, and Steve was just back out of prison and has just started getting his life back together. And he met us, and we had a couple of guys who were in the recovery program at that time in our um, I don't know, our entourage. And so he hit it off with us, and on that, based on that, and also the the kindred spirit of the music and that sort of thing. And we just sort of kept in touch. And then we got the chance to record with him, and that was such a great experience. Like the idea was we were going to record maybe a whole record, but definitely like an EP. And it got cut short because Bill Monroe died, and he had to go do the whole funeral for Bill Monroe, and we never reconnected. But we did get some great recordings out of that. You know, we recorded New York City, which is on his record, and we recorded a version of one of our songs, and we recorded one of his songs, and we also did a cover of a Rolling Stones song, and it was all just so great. And I think I learned more about the nature of recording in the 3 or 4 days we were with Steve than I had in my entire career up to that point. You know, it's just
Interesting.
real eye
Interesting.
opening the way he worked in the studio, and it's the way we work still to this day. It's really great.
Interesting. So, how much did the interactions with Willie lead to the whole country thing?
Well, it happened around the same time actually. So we when we were making that third record, Sacrilicious in Austin, is when we first got to meet Willie. And it was around that time where the Twisted Willie idea sort of started. And that's when I started thinking about, well, I think we're going to make a country record. And that whole shift in our dynamic happened.
Very nice, very nice. I love that album. The songwriting on it, obviously. I mean, I've heard you call yourself a song maker upper, which I love.
Yeah.
Um, I've told people I'm a content maker upper, so I've lifted your
Yeah.
thing there.
Yeah. I write surprisingly little down. You know, I write the lyrics down and that's it. So I'm not really writing a song. I'm making it up.
Right. Do you feel that there's a progression from say Coattail Rider to the history of rock and roll? Do you feel like there's any thematic, well, obviously there's thematic things, but do you feel like there's a progression? Do you feel like you've grown as a song maker upper?
Unfortunately, I think I do. Yeah, because I'm less afraid to write a more meaningful song now, I guess. But uh, I've gone to great lengths to try to avoid the 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 pitfalls of growing as a musician.
I love it. The
there's
Ramones. It's the Ramones model.
it is exactly. When somebody say you've made the same record 12 times, I'm quick to correct them and say no, I've made the same record 13 times.
Right.
So I other than the country sort of departure that we have as a part of us, I've really tried to kind of make the same kind of record, and I'm fairly proud of our body of work in that regard. It's not as symmetrical as the Ramones or AC/DC or even Motorhead, but it's close.
Right. You're one of my favorites, man. I when I my ex-wife left, I listened to Pretty Fucked Up every day for 2 or 3 months, several times a day. It was like my anthem. It was
That's what that song's for.
that is what that song's for.
Kevin, I can tell that this interview was definitely one that went in a lot of different directions, and we've got a lot more coming up, actually, 2 additional segments. Before we get into that second segment, though, want to remind everybody that we are on social media at All That Jam Pod, allthatjampod.com, and then YouTube too. Make sure that you're looking there for complete interviews. I've gone back and listened to a few of them too, and it's really nice after some time has passed to listen again, and I hear a lot of things that either maybe I in the moment wasn't able to focus on, or things that just hit me in a different way. So definitely worth heading over there if you haven't yet, and subscribe, make sure that you're letting us know what you would like to listen to. All right, so Kevin, let's get back into the second of our third segments of Eddie Spaghetti. This is where you were talking to him about a bunch of different things, including some studio work, and then how they decide on covers.
Interesting. Are you in the studio now? Have you been? I know you're getting back out on the road in a few days. Have you been recording anything new?
Well, we just finished making the new Metal Marty record, and I have this band on the side called the Franklin County Trucking Company, and we finished something in the studio recently, and I think we're going to get back in the studio with the Super Suckers sometime this summer. I've got a bunch of new songs, and we're about ready to.
You got some stuff made up.
I got some stuff made up. Yeah, I've been making up some stuff.
You do fantastic covers. I'm gonna throw 3 names out, and just if you want to talk about any one of them, Hey Ya, Sail On, and Dead Homies. It does not seem like something the punk band the Super Suckers are going to be doing, either any 3 of them.
Yeah, I like all 3 of those songs a lot, and I am happy with the covers that we did of them. Hey Ya came out especially good, and people still ask to play that song, and we don't play it anymore. It feels like the moment for that has kind of come and gone, but it was a great thing to do at the time.
You know who else plays a cover of that? I'm going to
No,
jump into this here. Trey Anastasio.
oh, my
But
favorite.
but he does not do the shake it like a Polaroid part. And I'm like, that's so weak sauce. I'm like, you
That's the
got to
best
do the
part.
shake. That is the best part of the whole thing. Can we talk a little bit about why you don't like them? I'm just fascinated that you said that to me. And, I'm very on the fence with a lot of what Fish does now, but they were a college thing for me. So I have a affinity towards that.
Yeah, I my hatred of the Grateful Dead was born just out of high school. I dated this girl who was like a fanatic and had all these live cassettes, and that was all she would listen to. And I had to break up with her because I couldn't do it. And I just I feel like that kind of music, it sounds made up. Like there's nobody in charge. And for me to like it, I have to have somebody, like the Ramones or AC/DC or Motorhead. These are the kind of bands that resonate with me, and they're not jamming. There are
Right.
solos. There's a designated spot for that sort of shit. And
Right.
I
Go
just
for it. Let's get to the chorus.
exactly. And I can't. My life is too short to
Right.
listen to somebody make shit up on the fly.
Right. It's interesting to me because I find threads of what you do, maybe like solo more, but with the acoustic side of, what the Grateful Dead did, which I guess is the more song oriented. This is the song, there's a solo in the middle. Maybe there's a second solo if the other guitarist gets a breakdown. Boom, we're out of there. Um, like Ween, you cover Pissing Up a Rope, or you have. I saw it with, I guess, the Railbenders. Was there a
Uh-huh.
band called the Railbenders back 15 years ago or something?
Yep.
And I found that fascinating. Where did you come up with Ween? I mean, Ween has the same attitude. It's the fuck them if they can't take a joke thing on
Yeah.
one end, but Ween is a lot weirder. It isn't straight ahead rock and roll. How'd you come to Ween and that?
I really like Ween. I think that they are an outlier. They kind of do float around in that jam bandy world a little bit, and I get some shit from my friends who really don't like that.
They hate that Fish covered Roses Are Free. They hate that Fish fans show up at Ween shows. I've heard Mickey does at least.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I think Ween is exceptional, and I don't like everything they do. I don't think anybody possibly could, but they are when they're on, they're brilliant.
It's funny. when I emailed Mr. Spaghetti the first time, he sent me an email back and he said, I hate jam bands. I think Fish sucks. And I sent him an email back. I was like, you're one of my favorite songwriters, man. I just really want to interview you. I said, we're all that jam, but we go beyond it. So, of course, I couldn't not ask him when I had him there and talking about covers and Ween and how they both, he did Ween songs and Trey they both did that Outcast tune. And yeah, that's fascinating. Before we get back into the third part, let me tell you what's going on next week. On tomorrow, we have Apollo's Sons, Eddie D, talking about touring America, being a Canadian coming down below the border. Wednesday, we got Ben Bloom on improvisation and songwriting. Thursday, we have the Yak Attack origin story. Friday, Jordan Fairless on Corey's first year and about Motel 6. Amanda, you asked him about that, and we tied that in with their first year, which has been a banner first year, to say the least. Saturday, we got Matt Glickman on his new LP. And Sunday, Nayed Hussein and Greg Hotza on playing Indian jazz fusion. And with that, let's jump back into 3-chord rock and roll. This is our last clip. We get into Sub Pop, Mid-Fi label that they had, and the basic state of the industry. And we'll see on the other side. You were on Sub Pop, and then you had, what was that, Mid-Fi? That was your own.
I had that for a while.
And I'm not sure. I didn't have time to look up where you are now exactly, but can we talk a little bit about the state of the industry and surviving? I mean, I know you guys are road dogs, and I guess that's how you keep doing it these days with streaming and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, our royalty checks were already paltry when everybody stopped buying the records. So, it sort of hit us the hardest in a way because, all the little tiny amount we were making is now gone. So now you're basically just making these records for free. And it's an advertisement for the live show. And you're exactly right. That's how we make it work is we keep making up new music because it's what we like to do and we're passionate about it. I know there's no need for it. Nobody needs a new rock and roll song from the Super Suckers, nobody's clamoring for that, but I'm compelled to do it. So I'm going to keep doing it. And I'm appreciative that I'm able to, continue to have an audience. And, it's never been a huge audience for us. So it's not like, there's a lot of disappointment, but, when nobody shows up to a show, it's just same as another day. But, I'm
rock and roll
more
records.
gratitude than I am, worrying about how much better it ought to be.
Right. You know what? I love that you guys still do the videos. Rock and Roll Records Ain't Selling This Year would have been huge on MTV in 91.
Yeah.
It didn't exist at the right moment for that. But I mean, every time you guys put out a new single or you pick one off the album or a couple, you do videos. Do you feel like you want to talk a little bit about the video component of what you do, if there is one?
Yeah, we're actually going to go make a video day after tomorrow. We're going to make a couple of videos for this Metal Marty record that we just finished. The Metal Marty record is that? What's that?
The name of the Metal Marty record?
It's called Metal Marty's Greatest Hits. And he's the guitar player in the Super Suckers. I don't know if you know about him.
Yeah.
And I just decided that it's time to make him a thing. So the new Super Suckers project is essentially the new Metal Marty record. Very nice. And that's why it'll appear like there's a gap in the Super Suckers production because I put all my effort into that. And, I made up a lot of the songs on that record. And it's, I'm very involved in it. So we're going to go make a couple videos out in Joshua Tree on Thursday.
Nice. Very nice.
So it's and they're fun to do, and it's easy, and it's everybody gets along in the band, so there's no drama, and it's just it's a fun sort of light way to paint a picture of your song.
There you go. So are these covers, or I guess you said you've been working on it? Are they all originals? What is the track?
Yeah, there's one cover, but they're all originals on the record. And the cover is a song by this guy named Roger Allen Wade, who's a amazing songwriter.
Very nice, very nice. That's so cool. Last November you played Pearl Street, and you did Rock and Roll Singer to open the show, and I had never heard you play that in all the years I've been seeing you, and I was like, that's weird. I just thought of that because I mentioned it at the top. That's great. You know, my kids, I showed them the email you sent, and they were like, "We love that guy."
Because he's an asshole.
Just
Yeah, I
a
told my
bit.
kid about it too, and he's like, "You're going to be a dick on that show, aren't you?" I'm like, "No."
No, not at all. Yes, no, I've been a huge fan forever. But yeah, we covered a lot. I'll let you get back to your life and doing what you're doing. And thank you so much.
Kevin, that was truly a really, I think, very interesting conversation because of that honesty, which you mentioned earlier. And I think that's one reason why you all were able to get into so many different topics. So I really love that one. As I'm sitting here just listening to that conversation and then thinking about some of the stories for this week, it really makes me want to go back and maybe get some information, some details from some of the artists that we've talked to before, or maybe others, about how exactly they are making it work. And I guess what we talked about today is making me curious because clearly it is a patchwork quilt and involves a lot of creativity, probably a lot
Right.
of flexibility too. And so, we'll see if we can maybe get some
I,
other information from bands
I,
we love.
I think Raina and Natalie Brooke both said that they taught. Probably go look at people's Facebook pages because that's something, or go to their websites because if you're doing it, you're probably trying to advertise it to get some. I know people do the video lessons. That's got to be a fascinating way to connect with people.
Yeah, and you get to know artists in different ways. I was just thinking about, some other musicians that I really know and respect. Matt Slocum, who currently plays with Railroad Earth, used to play with Aquarium Rescue Unit, among many, many others. He's an incredible keyboardist. He is always posting online on his personal Facebook page about refurbishing, historical instruments,
Mm-hmm.
pianos, keyboards, and it's amazing the work that he does. Also gives lessons, and so yeah, I feel like there is a lot of that around, and that makes sense. There's probably some things that I wouldn't think about that came out in this article, and I'm curious if others are trying even maybe more inventive ways to make it happen.
There you go. So, what do you do for Thanksgiving?
So this year we're going to be home, like I mentioned, locally here in Denver, and I know in a lot of other cities around the country. There is that annual Last Waltz concert. We have that here in Boulder and in Denver, so it's 2 nights for people that want to go. And I always say it's the annual contest to see how many people you can fit on one stage at one time. Usually there ends up being 20 to 30 people at any given
Oh,
point, and they
I,
just rotate in and out all night.
I think when we talked to Tim Carbone about that, maybe, or no, and maybe it was Drunken Hearts and Andrew from
Yeah,
Drunken
there's
Hearts.
so many local artists here in this area that's kind of like their annual Thanksgiving tradition in a way. And so you can see for them it's a time to get back together because I think it's going on almost 20 years, at least out here, for doing that. So I look forward to that. It's always a great time. The music is incredible, and everyone's there just to, be together.
Is it at the Fox?
So typically Boulder Theater, actually,
Okay,
so it
well,
needs a
right.
little bit of a bigger space. And then often the Fillmore in Denver is that location.
Okay, so right, so you don't have to drive all the way up to Boulder there.
Yeah, although that's a great spot. It's a
Yeah.
really perfect setting for that kind of
Yes,
show.
Boulder's a cool little town. Expensive, but
Super
that's
expensive. Yeah, I don't live
that's
there.
right. So next week we're going to have our, I guess, what we would call a Thanksgiving episode, in as much as we're going to have a Thanksgiving episode. And our interview is going to be with Brian Haas. And Brian Haas and Amanda and I talked for well over 2 hours. So there's so much there. We're going to have to figure out something to
I
do
know.
more.
Yeah,
So it's very
that
loquacious and so giving. You got to love that. So make sure you look for that. And at All That Jam Pod on the social medias. And with that, I'll just say stay beautiful, but don't stay underground too long. I'll talk to you soon, Amanda.
all right. Have a great week, Kevin.